The sirens cut through the Colorado night like blades. Snow whipped sideways across the empty highway as a black SUV fishtailed, tires screaming. Headlights bouncing off nothing but darkness and wire fence, 10 miles ahead. A concrete fortress rose from the high desert low, windowless, and silent. ADX Florence didn't glow like a city. It absorbed light. It swallowed sound. And tonight, it was waiting. The SUV skidded to a halt beneath floodlights. Doors flew open. Federal agents moved fast. Boots crunching on ice, hands tight on rifles. Inside the back seat, shackled at wrists and ankles, sat Daniel Mercer, 43 years old, former logistics contractor, suspected architect of a money laundering pipeline that funneled millions to violent extremist cells overseas, a man who had vanished twice before, reappearing with new passports and dead witnesses in his wake. Now he stared straight ahead. Jaw clenched, eyes flat, no plea, no protest. The gates opened with a hydraulic groan. As Mercer disappeared into the compound, the wind carried something else whispers, because in the weeks leading up to this night, 3 men connected to Mercer's network had died in custody, 1 in a county jail, 1 during transport, 1 in a federal holding cell. Officially unrelated, and officially, everyone knew the same rumor. Mercer talked, and someone was making sure others stayed silent. ADX Florence sat at 5,400 feet above sea level, carved into emptiness, built to hold the worst of the worst. It was designed to erase chaos with silence, 23 hours a day alone, concrete beds, solid steel doors, meals slid through slots, voices reduced to echoes. It was supposed to be fail-safe, but prisons are run by people, and people carry secrets. Special Agent Laura Haynes knew that better than anyone. She had chased Mercer's money trail across 3 countries and lost a partner to a car bomb in Rotterdam that never made the news. When Mercer slipped through her fingers the first time, it had nearly ended her career. When he slipped again, it hardened her. Now she watched the gates seal behind him and felt no relief, only dread. Because men like Mercer didn't just vanish into ADX, they left fingerprints in places no one thought to look. Inside the facility, Warden Thomas Klein stood under fluorescent lights, clipboard tucked to his chest like a shield. Klein was a believer. Rules, protocol, order. He'd spent 20 years turning prisons into machines that didn't need him. He greeted Mercer without ceremony, eyes scanning restraints, posture rigid. "You're at Florence," he said. "Your world just got smaller." Mercer didn't blink. You'd be surprised how much fits in a small space. They logged him in. Photograph, fingerprints, medical check. Every step was recorded, time-stamped, audited. Cell assignment range D. Unit 12. No neighbors within earshot. No windows. The door closed with a sound like finality. Across the country, a woman named Evelyn Price watched the news with the sound off. She was Mercer's former accountant, once trusted, later discarded. She had flipped quietly 2 months earlier after a late-night knock and a file laid open on her kitchen table. Photos, transfers, names she wished she didn't recognize. Evelyn had agreed to testify, but the deaths had shaken her. She checked her phone compulsively, waiting for a call that never came. Protection. They'd promise. Safety. But promises had a way of thinning when the money was deep and the prison walls were thick. Back in Florence, routine settled in like dust, days folded into nights without markers. Mercer counted steps, counted breaths. He wrote letters that never left the unit. He requested books on logistics and supply chains, then switched to biographies. He spoke to no one, but he listened. Every echo mattered. Every footstep carried information. On the 10th day, something changed. A corrections officer named Paul Reyes found a folded scrap of paper in Mercer's food tray slot during evening rounds. That wasn't supposed to happen. Items didn't pass between cells. Doors didn't open. Slots didn't trade secrets. Reyes stood frozen, heart hammering, eyes darting to the cameras. He slid the paper into his pocket and finished his route with shaking hands. In the break room, he unfolded it. We all live on routes. Some lead out. No signature. No threats. Just a truth, disguised as a riddle. Reyes flushed the paper down the sink and told no one. He had a mortgage, a daughter, A job that paid enough to keep the lights on. He told himself it was
That
nothing.
night,
The power flickered for 3 seconds. 3 seconds wasn't long. Not long enough to trip alarms or unlock doors. But it was long enough to reset a camera on range D. When the feed came back, Mercer stood in the center of his cell, hands behind his back, staring straight into the lens. Smiling. Agent Haynes got the call at 2:14 a.m. "We've got anomalies," the duty officer said. "Logs don't match footage. Minor outage, probably nothing." Haynes didn't sleep after that. She drove to Florence at dawn, the desert pale and unforgiving, in the control room. She watched playback until her eyes burned. Mercer's smile lingered like an accusation. "He wants us to see him," she said. Warden Klein bristled. "This place doesn't bend. Every place bends." Haynes replied, "You just don't hear it when it does." They audited staff access. Clean. They reviewed maintenance schedules. Clean. They pulled commissary records. Boring. Then Haynes noticed something small. On the night of the flicker, a maintenance request had been logged and closed within 4 minutes. A routing issue, signed off by a contractor who hadn't been on site in weeks. They traced the name, fake. They traced the credentials, cloned. Someone had built a door inside the system and slipped through without leaving footprints. 2 days later, Evelyn Price vanished. Her apartment showed no signs of forced entry. Her phone lay on the kitchen counter. Screen dark. The only thing missing was a flash drive she kept taped under a drawer. When Haynes heard, her stomach dropped. She called Florence immediately. Mercer was calm during the interview. "Eyes steady, posture relaxed. I don't have a phone," he said mildly. "I don't have a computer. I don't have visitors. Yet people connected to you keep dying or disappearing," Haynes said. "Correlation is a lazy man's proof," Mercer replied. "You put me in a box and expect the world to stop moving." They searched his cell. Nothing. No paper. No contraband. Just concrete and steel and silence. That evening, Reyes didn't come in for his shift. His car was found on a county road, engine cold, driver's door open. No blood. No body. In the glove compartment, a folded note waited, dry and deliberate. Routes change. Back at ADX Florence, Warden Klein authorized a lockdown. Cameras watched empty corridors. Doors stayed sealed. The prison did what it was built to do: contain. But when Haynes reviewed the logs one more time, she noticed a pattern: tiny gaps, micro delays. Routes, delivery routes, maintenance routes. Data routes had been nudged, rerouted, optimized, not by breaking rules, by obeying them too well. She stood in the control room as the realization landed like a punch. Mercer wasn't running an operation from inside the prison. He had designed the prison to run for him. And when they finally opened a maintenance panel behind range D1, no one remembered. Approving what they found inside changed everything. The panel opened with a hiss of stale air and dust, revealing a cavity no wider than a coffin and packed with cable runs, junction boxes, and a fiber splitter that didn't belong there. It wasn't sabotage, it was craftsmanship. Agent Laura Haynes stared into the dark space as technicians snapped photos. The splitter was military-grade, encrypted, piggybacking on legitimate maintenance lines. Whoever installed it hadn't broken into ADX Florence. They'd blended in quietly, patiently, like a parasite that learned the rhythm of its host. Warden Klein's face had gone gray. "That system is isolated," he said. More to himself than anyone else. "It can't reach outside." "Not directly," Haynes replied, "but indirectly. Through contractors, vendors, transport schedules, data relays. It's a map. He doesn't need a phone. He needs routes." They traced the cables backward and forward. The signal bounced through a service hub in Pueblo, then into a shell server registered to a logistics firm that existed only on paper. The firm had filed bids, lost them, refiled under different names, always close, always watching. Mercer had built this years ago. The lockdown tightened. Meals were delayed. Lights stayed on. Sleep fractured. The prison breathed anxiety through concrete veins. Officers whispered. Cameras watched watchers. And somewhere inside range D, Daniel Mercer waited. When they brought him in again, he looked thinner but sharper, as if deprivation had stripped him down to something more efficient. He listened while Haynes laid out the evidence, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving his. You embedded infrastructure in a federal Supermax, she said. You routed information. You signaled people who acted on it. You think that makes you untouchable? Mercer tilted his head. I think it makes me predictable, he said. Which is safer than being unknown. Evelyn Price is missing, Haynes said. Paul Reyes is missing. You want to tell me where they are? Mercer smiled without warmth. I want to tell you why, Klein cut in. Interview's over, but Mercer leaned forward. If you pull me back now, he said softly, you'll lose another one. The words landed heavy. Haynes felt it, the old instinct, the one that had kept her alive when rules got people killed. Who? She asked. Mercer met her gaze. Someone you trust. They found the body an hour later. Officer Daniel Croft, a transport coordinator with 15 years on the job, lay slumped in his office chair, eyes open. Hands resting on the desk like he'd fallen asleep at work. No wounds, no struggle. The medical examiner would later call it an aneurysm, natural causes, but the timing was too neat, the coincidence too perfect. On his computer, a single window remained open, a routing spreadsheet showing altered delivery schedules for the past 6 months. Routes change. The staff meeting that followed was tense and short. Klein suspended all non-essential movement. Outside contractors were cut off. Internal audits multiplied, but prisons weren't sealed jars. They were ecosystems, and ecosystems adapted. Haynes went back to the beginning. Mercer's first disappearance. Rotterdam. The car bomb. The partner she never talked about. She pulled the old case file and found something she'd missed before, a vendor invoice tied to port security upgrades. The name rang familiar. The shell firm. The same ghost. Mercer hadn't just laundered money. He'd laundered access. Across town, in a motel that smelled like bleach and burned coffee, Evelyn Price woke to the sound of keys. Her wrists were bound, her mouth dry, her head pounding. The room was dark except for the bathroom light, where a man stood with his back to her, washing his hands like a ritual. You're safe, he said without turning. For now. Who are you? She whispered. A courier, he said. Like you used to be. Numbers in, numbers out. Mercer, her voice cracked. The man laughed softly. Mercer doesn't need to be anywhere to be everywhere. He slid a phone across the bed. On the screen, a message blinked. Deliver or disappear. Back in Florence, Haynes noticed the change before anyone else did. Mercer stopped requesting books, stopped pacing. He sat on his bunk for hours, eyes closed, breathing slow, waiting. What's he doing? Klein asked. He's listening, Haynes said. It wasn't broadcasting out. It was receiving. Short bursts, timing signals. Like a metronome. Shut it down, Klein ordered. They tried. The signal rerouted, slipped through redundancy. Surface somewhere else. Kill one path. Another opened. Mercer had designed it like a hydra. False alarm. But protocol demanded response. Door sealed. Staff repositioned. In the chaos, Emile Cart paused in the wrong place for 30 seconds. 30 seconds was enough. When the cart moved on, a corrections officer noticed something odd in Mercer's tray. Not paper. Not metal. A smear of sauce arranged into 3 short lines. Haynes felt the cold crawl up her spine. Morse, she said. 3 dashes, Klein replied. What does it mean? She swallowed. As in okay? As in proceed. They rushed to the control room. The timing signal spiked. Somewhere beyond the walls, something was moving. Haynes called her supervisor, then her old contact in Homeland Security. No answer. She tried again. Evelyn Price filled the screen, eyes wide, face pale. Behind her, a window showed a city street at dawn. She held up a flash drive between trembling fingers. A text appeared beneath the image. One more route. Haynes typed back with shaking hands. WHERE. The reply came instantly. The truth hit her like a collapse. Mercer didn't need to escape. He needed to transfer custody of information, of leverage. ADX Florence was the safest place to be while the world rearranged itself around his assets. Mercer stood as the door opened, hands already behind his back, compliant. "You're late," he said gently. "End it," Haynes snapped. "Call them off." Mercer smiled. "Of course you didn't." Haynes felt the walls closing in, not with noise, but with inevitability. "On whether you follow the route I left you." The transport sirens grew louder, and as officers moved to escort Mercer down the corridor, Haynes realized the most dangerous truth of all. The prison had never been his cage. It had been his control room. The corridor swallowed them whole. Daniel Mercer walked between four armed officers, shackles biting into his wrists and ankles, posture relaxed, head slightly bowed as if in prayer. The lights hummed overhead, cameras tracked every step. On paper, this was control. In reality, it was choreography. Agent Laura Haynes followed one pace behind, eyes scanning everything: the ceiling seams, the floor drains, the timing between footfalls. The transport order pulsed on her phone. Stamped with authority so high it might as well have come from God. She'd verified the signatures. Twice. They were real, or real enough to kill a career if she challenged them without proof. "Where's the route?" she asked quietly. Mercer didn't turn. "You're standing on it." The first gate opened, then the second. The air changed colder, sharper. The transport bay waited ahead. Concrete and steel and diesel fumes, outside. Engines idled. Black vans, no markings. Drivers in identical jackets. Faces hidden by the glare. Warden Klein stood at the threshold, jaw clenched. "I'm logging a formal objection," he said. "This transfer violates your sense of ownership," Mercer said calmly. "Not the rules." Klein looked to Haynes. She saw it then: the crack. Not in the walls, in the people. Mercer had learned them, anticipated their fears, their incentives. He didn't need to bribe everyone, just enough. "Pose the transfer," Haynes said. Louder now. A driver glanced back. "We're on a federal clock." "Then slow it down," she shot back, "or you'll be explaining why a protected witness vanished under your watch." The driver hesitated. The engines kept running. Haynes turned to Mercer. "Evelyn Price," she said, "if she dies, this ends messy." Mercer finally looked at her. For the first time, something flickered: calculation under control. "She won't," he said, "if you choose correctly." "Choose what?" "Whether you want the story," Mercer replied, "or the silence." The screen on Haynes's phone lit up. A live feed. Evelyn. Again, now seated at a small table, hands-free. The flash drive resting between her palms. She looked exhausted but alive. A message appeared beneath the video. "Transfer confirms delivery." Haynes's pulse roared in her ears. Mercer wasn't bargaining for his freedom. He was closing a loop. The transfer wasn't the escape, it was the receipt. "Cancel it," she whispered. Mercer's smile was almost kind. Too late. The lights went out. Not a flicker this time. A full blackout. Engines coughed. Alarms died mid-wail. In the dark, someone shouted. Another voice answered. Then a thud. Then silence, thick and suffocating. Emergency power kicked in 10 seconds later. Red lights bathed the bay. The vans were still there. The officers still standing. Mercer was gone. Panic fractured the room. Orders overlapped. Names were shouted. Doors slammed. Cameras spun uselessly, rebooting one by one. They found the answer in the floor. A maintenance hatch stood open beneath where Mercer had been standing flush with the concrete, invisible unless you knew to look. The hatch led into a service tunnel older than the prison itself, a relic from construction days. Sealed on blueprints and forgotten in practice, forgotten by everyone except Mercer. They ran. The tunnel sloped downward, damp and narrow, lit by emergency strips that hummed weakly. Footprints smeared the dust fresh, deliberate. At the end, a steel door hung open to the night. Beyond it, the desert stretched wide and empty. A flare ignited on a distant ridge, then another. Headlights cut across the dark as a convoy moved not toward Florence, but away from it, already accelerating. By the time helicopters lifted, the convoy had vanished into the maze of back roads Mercer had mapped years earlier. He was gone. The fallout came fast and loud. Internal affairs descended. Committees convened. Press releases blamed systemic vulnerabilities. Warden Klein resigned. Before he was asked, careers ended quietly. Files disappeared loudly. Evelyn Price was recovered 2 days later at a rest stop outside Flagstaff, shaken, alive. The flash drive was gone. She told Haynes everything she could. The shell companies, the access laundering, the way Mercer had seeded infrastructure like sleeper cells waiting for the moment to wake them. But when it came time to testify, her statements softened, names blurred, memory failed. Fear does that. 3 months passed. Winter thinned into spring. The desert bloomed in small, stubborn ways. Haynes returned to her desk, though it never felt the same. She replayed the footage in her head, the smile, the timing, the certainty. Mercer hadn't run. He'd graduated. Then the body was found. A Port Authority manager in Marseille. Middle-aged. Clean record. Dead in his office, slumped at his desk, eyes open. No wounds, no struggle. Aneurysm, the report said. On his computer, a routing spreadsheet glowed. Routes change. Interpol called it coincidence. Haynes didn't. She followed the money again. Slower this time, deeper. The pattern re-emerged, not loud, not obvious. Elegant. Ports, warehouses, data centers. Always legal, always adjacent to power. Then came the message. No sender, no subject, just a line of text. You're still on the route. Haynes stared at the screen long after it dimmed. She thought of ADX Florence, of concrete and silence and the lie of control. She thought of Mercer, alone in a cell, building an empire with patience and permission. They never found him, but sometimes, late at night, when the city quieted and the roads emptied, Haynes imagined him somewhere ordinary, standing in line for coffee, watching traffic flow, counting seconds between green lights, listening, because some prisons don't hold people. They teach them how to disappear, and if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one.